my wife Shirley and I were fortunate enough to be able to experience this fantastic adventure. I would like to share our experiences with friends and family, as well as anyone else who might be interested in such a tour. The travel time to Vietnam was almost 24 hours door to door. We first flew from San Francisco to Tokyo, had a 2-hour layover, then flew on to Ho Chi Minh City. The entire trip was a total of 18 days. We started with 2 nights in Ho Chi Minh City, then a 2-hour bus drive to the Mekong River to board our ship, the Mekong Jewell. We sailed up the Mekong River for 7 nights, finishing the cruise portion near Phom Phen, Cambodia. Next was a 5-hour bus ride to Siem Reap for 3 nights stay at a resort there. We then flew to Hanoi for the final 5 days, which included 2 nights on a smaller ship in Ha Long Bay. After traveling the better part of 24 hours, we finally landed in Ho Chi Minh City and were greeted with a 45-minute line at the immigration. The drive to the hotel took another 45 minutes, although in rush hour it can take 2 hours. The Park Hyatt Hotel itself was beautiful and was decorated for Christmas. The rooms were spacious and very nice. The Park Hyatt Hotel in Saigon had one of the nicest buffet breakfasts I've ever had. We made a custom order from the omelet station, which was a great start to the day. The first thing you notice in Saigon is how many motor scooters there are everywhere. Vietnam is still a relatively poor country with an average per capita income of about $4,000 per year compared to $70,000 in the United States. When the communists took over South Vietnam, they nationalized the bus companies and the service deteriorated rapidly, so public transportation now is almost non-existent. We often saw families of 4 or 5 people riding on the same motor scooter. Local entrepreneurs will often carry their entire inventory on the back of the small motorcycle.
Want to buy a hat? This is where you go. Lots of hats.
When we first met our local guide, the first thing he taught us was how to cross the street. In most streets in Saigon, there are no traffic lights and no crosswalks. You have to stand on the side of the street looking for a slight gap in the traffic. If you're waiting for a long gap with no traffic, you will never get across. The key is that once you start walking, keep a steady pace and don't stop. The motorbike riders are used to this behavior and will expertly maneuver their bikes to miss you, but often coming within 12 inches of hitting you. If you panic and stop or jump back, that is when the bikes could hit you. There are a lot of young people who live in Vietnam, but housing is very expensive, and often the apartments are very crowded with 5 to 6 people per room. Since there is no privacy at home, a lot of the social life is conducted outdoors, sitting on the sidewalk curbs of the local park. It is not legal to sit on the grass. There is a very famous photo from the Vietnam War showing a Marine helicopter evacuating the last Americans from the embassy in Saigon as communists were closing in. This is the building that is now surrounded by high-rise buildings. We took a quick tour of the post office in Saigon that was built during the French colonial times and showed a very nice architecture. As part of the morning tour, we visited the Reunification Palace, where the last vestiges of the South Vietnamese leadership were stationed when 2 North Vietnamese tanks crashed through the wall. The terms of the surrender were negotiated in the conference rooms of this palace. The final stop in our morning city tour was at an artisan's workshop where they were making lacquer artwork. The artwork was beautiful, but it would not match anything in our house, so we didn't have any temptation to really buy anything. After the morning tour, we had a free afternoon. We decided to take a short walk down the street to the central market where there was a very wide variety of goods available under one roof. Our ship, the Mekong Jewell, was a 2-hour bus ride from central Saigon. On the way to the boat, we stopped at the Chu Chai Tunnel Memorial set up by the Vietnamese government to honor the brave Viet Cong soldiers that fought against the U.S. forces. Although outmatched by the technology and firepower of the U.S. forces, the Viet Cong survived and eventually won the war by digging hundreds of miles of tunnels. These were virtual underground cities that would protect from overhead bombing campaigns. The U.S. forces tried to clear out the tunnels by sending in ground troops, but they were met with traps designed to catch unsuspected soldiers on foot patrol.
Action again!
Wow.
They offered the tourists a chance to crawl through a 100-yard segment of the tunnel that still existed, and a few of our group tried this. After the morning excursion to the tunnels, the next stop was the Mekong Jewell for boarding. This is leaving the bathroom, going into our sitting area right here. Again, we have a balcony out there. A nice little couch right here. And this is our bed area right here. And we have our closet area here. Little writing desk. There's a beautiful suite here. The bathroom right here. And the shower and toilet right here. And the bathtub overlooking the veranda. The Mekong Jewell has 34 rooms, so the normal capacity is 68 passengers. For our cruise, only 12 rooms were taken, so only 24 passengers. 2 weeks before we left, we were offered a great deal to upgrade to a suite at a heavily discounted rate, which is what we did. The regular rooms are smaller than this, but are still very nice. Every night we had a little snack delivered to our room around 6 p.m. Our activity for today was to visit a small rural village along the Mekong River. We needed to board a sampan, which is a smaller boat paddled by one of the local village women. The couple in front of us got a young driver, and we had a much older woman to paddle our boat. I became concerned when the young woman ahead of us got stuck in the current and couldn't proceed. I thought to myself, if the young woman got stuck, how is our poor little grandma going to be able to get through? Without hesitation, she jumped into the water and started pulling our boat forward, like an ox pulling a cart that was stuck in the mud. When she got even with the young woman's boat, she threw her a line and basically towed both boats to the dock we were going to. This was our hero who saved the day for us. The people in this village had a variety of ways to earn a living. Our first stop was the wholesale nursery run by the woman seen here grafting a jackfruit sprout onto a more mature plant of a different species. Using this technique, the plants will bear fruit in 3 years rather than the normal 6 years. She exports these trees to Thailand, and her 20 employees can earn a living through this business. This barefoot gentleman was digging up the dirt to take back to his garden. When the rainy season comes every year, a lot of rich topsoil is washed down the Mekong River basin and it collects on the shore. This is very fertile and helps his garden grow quite a bit.
Soil by those bases is so essential for people like Stratford in Saigon, in big city, and she is making that for the market. First, she pouring a purity cement, we call glue, glue sticking the main material, which is chị, cái này là 2 phần xi măng, 1 phần cát phải không?
Phần cát, phần xi măng.
So 50-50, the ratio is 50% of soil sand, 50% of cement. So that combination will be glue clinging to the mold of sand. And the template, she's spinning it to decide the width of the cement. So make it solid enough to hold the soil and the tree for, could be decades, could be long time. Yeah.
The next lady we saw was making fish traps for her husband to catch fish in the Mekong River. This apparently was a fairly lucrative endeavor because she had a pretty nice house with a pretty nice tile entryway. We saw lots of examples of people living along the river, doing their laundry and having their visit to the local beauty salon. We were rewarded at the end of the day with a beautiful sunset while cruising up the Mekong River. This morning, we were able to visit a place that made a tasty treat similar to Rice Krispies. The process starts with a large wok-type thing that pops the rice.
Different kinds of sweetie cakes.
Next, a sugary syrup is made to mix with the rice.
This is sugar, not salt.
After mixing, the treat is packed down in a large wooden square where it can be cut into individual pieces. These pieces are then wrapped and the product is ready to go.
Okay, so after photo, and with the rice cube, you take the steamed rice paste, put on the tray. And that step is really hard. It's not easy to take it, not really broken.
This is Amazing Race, there's a challenge.
And in that step, if you don't try it all the way where it try to be the rice paper, you cut and we have rice noodle. That's a step of rice noodle. Okay, so now it's really hard, really challenging to take it one piece out. And of course, we have different kinds of rice paper. Another one is a quarter smaller of that, and much thinner.
This facility also included a display of some of the local artwork. In the afternoon, we continued cruising up the Mekong River, looking at the sights on the shore of the river. Today's exploration of daily life on the Great Delta was divided to a portion on land and a portion sailing on our boat. While on shore, our group was treated to a traditional dragon dance from the local performers. We did visit a temple to the Hoa Hoa religion, which was started in the 1930s. What is somewhat unique about this religion is that it combines elements of Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christian religions. You can see from this image, Jesus Christ was included along with the more traditional Asian religious figures. The local market was located right on the Mekong River with a dock on the back of it. That made it very easy for the local merchants to bring their produce early in the morning. We were able to visit a local market today that was very different from the one in Saigon that mainly catered to tourists. Since most families in rural Vietnam do not have refrigerators or freezers, shopping for food is done every day. The variety and freshness of the produce would rival any farmer's market in the United States. One difference here is that some of the seafood is very fresh, as in, it's still alive. The meat products were being cut up right in front of you on a table. A lot of the people live right on the river. When we woke up this morning, we found another river cruise boat tied up at the dock next to us in Phom Phen. Apparently, the other boat had an excursion scheduled for this morning, and each passenger had their own pedicab and driver waiting for them. For our Phnom Penh city tour this morning, we had two-person motorized carriages. The weather was nice, and this was a pleasant way to see the city. Phnom Penh was a surprisingly modern-looking city with plenty of traffic. Our driver was able to expertly weave in and out of the busy roundabout. We spent quite a bit of the city tour walking around the Royal Palace, which was very beautiful. In the afternoon, we had some free time and decided to visit the Central Market. Unlike the two previous markets we visited, this market seemed to cater to local residents, much like a shopping mall in America. Anybody want to buy a watch? Now here are some tasty treats you won't find in a normal, typical American mall food court. Which one tastes the best?
Yeah.
Which is the most delicious?
I like this one.
Nói tiếng Anh, nó đẹp có tiếng Anh nha phụ. Nó kê chùm hơi thực đôn nó mẹn pôn cái lanh phị như cái đẹp chân á.
That's
Đâu
tarantula.
đi kia, nó ngờ chú ai chưa?
Tarantula.
Yeah.
When I watch TV shows like Survivor and see them doing a challenge involving eating something really gross, I ask myself if I could also do that. This is a perfect chance to try, so I bought one of each type of insect and took them back to the boat for a nice afternoon snack. One worm or something like that. Could try this one. It's actually not bad. Now, let me work my way up to the cricket. Cricket right here. This one's crunchy. I have legs too. Big cricket here.
You know?
Mm.
How will that?
That's good.
That was weird. Try a little of the spider, and that's going to be it, I think, for me. Tarantula. Not too bad. On the morning we left Phnom Penh, we had a final excursion to the detention facility and the killing fields. This was by far the least enjoyable of any cruise activity I've ever done. Going into it, I know it's going to be shocking and depressing, and several members of our group decided not to go. The Khmer Rouge ruled the country from 1975 to 1979, immediately after the end of the Cambodian Civil War. The mass killings of more than 1 million people were part of a broad, state-sponsored Cambodian genocide. Even though reliving this part of history is depressing, I think it's important not to forget it. It is everyone's duty to make sure that something like this could never happen again. Today, Cambodia is a peaceful country with a bright future. On this day, we again explored villages along the Mekong River, this time in Cambodia. Like other areas in Vietnam and Cambodia, motor scooters are the primary mode of transportation, even when carrying a large load. Because the Mekong River is prone to flooding, most of the houses are built on stilts. Below the house, the area is used for motor scooter parking, storage, and shelter for the animals. We were invited to visit the inside of one of these houses, and it was surprisingly cool and very nicely appointed. It was a warm day outside, but inside, with the shade and the ventilation from the floor slats, it must have been 15 degrees cooler. I noticed that during our village tour, there was a policewoman following us on a motor scooter. I asked our guide, "What's up with that? Were the tourists committing a lot of crimes?" He replied, "No. It was to safeguard the tourists and protect them from aggressive panhandlers and pickpockets." I can generally say that I never felt unsafe at any time we were in Vietnam or Cambodia. Dyeing yarn and weaving textiles like scarves is one of the local industries. There must have been 7 or 8 little setups selling scarves, but like everywhere else, location is the key to success. The first stall we came upon drew the attention of the women, and several scarves were purchased. The tour guide kept telling the group that we didn't need to stop because there will be other places to buy scarves later. The people who we saw later in the tour did not get any business. It is my understanding that the people who agreed to open their homes to the tourists received compensation from the cruise company, and I think that is why our guide gently tried to steer us to certain vendors. The central meeting room for the village was in this pavilion. One of the highlights of the entire cruise was visiting a local school that was teaching English on a Saturday afternoon. The instructor would write a sentence on the board and the students would read along out loud. They set up the rooms so that each student could have one or two tourists sit next to them to help them with their lesson. Later in the day, we were able to visit a Buddhist temple and monastery located high on a hill with a great panoramic view of the Mekong River. We saw several young monks in training. The remainder of the day was spent cruising along the river. The resort was advertised as a golf resort, so of course I had to go check it out. The course was about a 10-minute tuk-tuk ride outside of town and was beautiful. Because of our schedule, I did not have time to actually play the course, but I was able to see the unique way they picked up the balls on the range at the end of the day. All these women are coming out here all of a sudden to pick up the golf balls. I think they're all the caddies. They're coming out here. And instead of having a machine to pick up the golf balls, just come out here and pick them up one by one.
Okay, here we are. Rides from Siem Reap. How nice so far.
The motor scooter was the primary mode of transportation for the locals, but the tuk-tuk was used to transport tourist couples around. When we stopped at the first park, our guide told us to look up, and we saw a tree full of bats.
They fly around and around. Then they go out of this area to find food until like 5:30 in the morning. During the summer, they come back.
There was a flower market for the local people right next to the park.
We call the Merlin. The old Merlin.
There was also a temple at the edge of the park where you could pray and burn incense. I'm not sure what the older woman close to us was praying for, but apparently the three younger girls were praying that they had passed their school exams. There was an attraction that involved sitting on a bench and dipping your feet into a tank filled with fish. The idea was that the fish would eat the dead skin off your feet. None of our group tried it after our guide mentioned that he had heard a tourist had gotten a serious infection from the fish tank water because it was not changed often enough. Siem Reap is a tourist town, and this is the main party street that comes alive after dark. At the end of the city tour, we visited an artisan's workshop where we could see them crafting their art pieces. When people think about visiting Cambodia, the first thing that comes to mind is the massive temple complex at Angkor Wat. Today's excursion was to visit this World Heritage Site. This sprawling temple site was built almost 1,000 years ago, first as a Hindu temple and later as a Buddhist temple. I was surprised to learn that in the 11th century, Siem Reap had a population of over 1 million people, making it the largest city in the world. For comparison, London at that time had about 18,000 people. Over the centuries, the temples fell into a state of disrepair as the jungle started to overgrow many of the buildings. The first Europeans visited this area in the 1500s, but was not, quote, rediscovered, unquote, until the 1800s. French and British explorers brought back tales of magnificent architectural ruins that rivaled the best that the Greeks and Romans had left behind. Over the last 100 years, the temples have been partially restored and now they form the basis of tourism in Cambodia. To ascend to the very top of the temple complex, you had to climb a very steep set of stairs, one going up and one going down. Once on top, you were rewarded with a very nice view of the surrounding countryside. The Angkor Wat temples form a beautiful backdrop, and many of the local brides come here to take their wedding photos. On our way out of the temple complex, we were greeted by a bunch of wild monkeys. As per our guide's instructions, we kept our distance and tried not to disturb them. In the evening, we had two excursions. First was a cooking class where we were taught how to prepare 3 traditional Cambodian dishes.
Who is you cook at home?
I cook at home.
You cook at home? Okay. What do you like to cook? Asian food or barbecue thing?
In barbecue.
A little bit of everything.
Oh, I see.
Some Chinese food.
Okay. Next we. Okay. So for the plate we have to use this kind of plate for your plate.
Our final event was a performance of some Cambodian acrobats. We started the day at 4 a.m. with a bus ride and a hike up a hill. We were rewarded with a nice sunrise over Angkor Wat. Next up was a gondola ride along the moat that circled the temple complex. It was very peaceful and tranquil.
Okay. Yeah, so now we're, see our faces here. We got the 4 men back there rowing our little gondola through here. We had a real nice trip. We saw the sunrise this morning over Angkor Wat. It was real nice. Got about 4 a.m. for that. So we're gonna have a pretty busy day. It's already 8 a.m. but we've been on the go for over 3 hours right now. But very beautiful here. Very, very pleasant. Very nice weather right now. Not very hot. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning, so we beat the heat.
Angkor Thom was the second major temple complex that we visited. The entrance was across a bridge that had a series of sculptures on either side. The left side sculptures were the friendly ones. On the right side were the evil demons. The restoration of this temple was not as extensive as that of Angkor Wat. Many of the towers had a face on each of the four sides. The walls were covered with extensive carvings that told stories of previous battles and victories that occurred on this site. The final temple was Prohm, which is also the least restored of the three temples. Many of the trees that invaded the site were left alone to give a feel of what happened with centuries of neglect. If these scenes look familiar, it might be because the Lara Croft movie Tomb Raiders with Angelina Jolie was actually filmed here.
One shot. You gotta do the unshot, Shirley.
We started our Hanoi tour with a visit to a 1,000-year-old university. There's also a temple on the site. Like a lot of places we visited, if there was nice scenery, there was a good chance somebody was doing a photo shoot there. The Hanoi Hilton is a nickname for a prison in Hanoi that held American pilots that were shot down during the Vietnam War. This included future U.S. Senator John McCain. This former prison was now a museum that serves two propaganda purposes for the government. First, it highlighted the many Vietnamese citizens who suffered under French colonial rule. Second, it showed many pictures of U.S. prisoners relaxing, playing games, and generally being treated well. There was also a section of personal accounts of Hanoi residents that suffered and died as a result of U.S. bombing campaigns. Despite the messages from this museum, I never felt any animosity from the Vietnamese people themselves on this trip. Everywhere we went, we were warmly welcomed, even as Americans. The final stop of the morning tour was at Ho Chi Minh's tomb. The leader himself wanted to be cremated, but after his death, the leadership of Vietnam decided he should be honored like Lenin in Moscow, with his body on display in a glass coffin. We were not allowed to take photos of the tomb itself, but we did file by in a solemn procession. The whole site is a big draw for domestic tour groups. We saw several groups of school children, as well as a large military group. Many of the school children greet us in the same way. "Hello, where are you from?" This would invariably be paired with a big smile. Parents in America will be familiar with the traffic jams in front of the school during afternoon pickup time. We observed this in Hanoi on the way back to the hotel. The two main differences between what we saw here and back home is that all the parents here are on motor scooters. The other difference, it is 5 p.m. instead of 3 p.m. back home. It was such a chaotic scene that the teacher would hold up a sign, in this case 4E, to let the crowd know which class it is. The final activity of the day was a water puppet show. This is an art form that goes back hundreds of years, with the puppet master standing in waist-deep water behind a bamboo curtain. This would entertain the local villagers long before they had TVs or smartphones. We checked out of our Hanoi hotel and had a 2-hour bus ride to Ha Long Bay. Although Vietnam is a relatively poor country, there are some people who are doing well financially. Pham Nhat Vuong is Vietnam's first billionaire, and they call him the Elon Musk of Vietnam. He got his start selling instant noodles in Ukraine and then returned to Vietnam to start the Vinh Group. We drove by a sprawling complex of new residential units that sell for around $1 million US. In addition to regular schools, he built a university right next door. Our bathroom stop was a newly constructed visitor center dedicated to the cultured pearl business. All the tour buses stopped here, so it's fairly crowded. There's a series of demonstrations on how the process of cultural pearls works.
Time blank, 1, 2, 2, blank, 2 to 4, and the last one, South Sea.
Oh, that's the hardest one. That's the one.
The yellowest, this is the most valuable in the world. 3 to 5 years for normal. Even longer, about 15 years. Một hai con rồi à? You see here, these are no longer enclosed by themselves. We remove the blood. So how to know it's a good one? When you make the comparison, you can tell which one is better. And you know why? Because we have 5 factors of this one. Yeah, so size, shape, color, luster, and coloration of the sample. Okay, so this is the better one here.
After that, we were led into a very large modern showroom selling pearls and other jewelry products. Maybe I'm clueless when it comes to fashion, but I thought pearls, like fur coats, have gone out of style. Maybe they are relying on Chinese tourists to support this very large showroom. After the showroom, we were able to board the boat that would be our home for the next 2 nights. Our stateroom was comfortable. It had a small balcony to sit out and look at the view if we wanted. Our first excursion off the boat was a chance to climb to the top of this hill. There were approximately 400 stone steps to get to the top, and only some of the segments had handrails. It was very crowded and, in my mind, a little bit dangerous. Once on top, we were rewarded with a very nice view. Later in the day, we visited Castaway Island. For this excursion, you had the option of a boat rowed by a local person or going on your own in a kayak. I decided on the kayak, and my wife chose the boat. The scenery in the lagoon was spectacular.
Go on the lagoon and ride my kayak. Shirley's in the main boat with everybody else. Very beautiful here.
We spent a lot of the day just sailing between the limestone formations that make Ha Long Bay unique. We had a beautiful sunset the first night, and I shot this picture. However, I used Photoshop to remove some of the boats in the foreground to create a more idyllic image. Here's what it actually looked like before the Photoshop treatment. If I had to summarize the Ha Long Bay experience, I would say very beautiful but very crowded. At one point, when we were anchored in the bay, I could see 36 other ships around us. Any popular site we visited tended to be very crowded. On the second day, we did more scenic cruising. Because many of the boats were only spending one night cruising, we were able to go much further into the bay and get away from the crowd somewhat. I never got tired of looking at the passing limestone formations, which are the hallmark of Ha Long Bay. We passed many fishing vessels while in this part of the bay. Because Ha Long Bay is a national park, people are not allowed to live on any of the islands. However, there are some floating villages that are home to the fishermen and their families. When we got to the village, we were greeted by 3 floating sampans that took us on a tour around their floating homes and fish pens. Most of the 30 or 40 other cruise ships look very similar to ours. In the last year or so, they began to build a more modern and upscale version of the cruise ships for Ha Long Bay. Just like the previous night, we were treated to a very nice sunset. On our final day of the tour, we got an early start for one last Ha Long Bay attraction, the dark and bright cave. We had to climb up a series of steps to enter the cave, which was quite large. There was a nice walkway and good lighting. When we exited the cave, we had a nice view of the bay beneath us. Once back in Hanoi, we visited a famous narrow alleyway street in the Old Quarter. This was lined with coffee shops and small cafes. What made this street unique was that there was a train track running right down the middle of the small street. You might think that this rail line was long abandoned, but in fact, there's a train that runs through here every day at 8:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. That is why this street is such an attraction for the tourists. We still have a few minutes before the train is due, and people are enjoying their snacks and drinks. We're getting closer to 3:30 p.m., and the woman on the other side of the tracks has collapsed the trays and put them on the ground to remind people to stay back. After almost getting run over by the train, we decided to explore the Old Quarter on a pedicab.
Christmas Eve, Hanoi. Having
Yeah,
a good time?
Christmas.
Got our hard-working guy, bicycle carrying us around.
Yeah.
A lot of jewelry on this street right here. A lot of odds and ends here. Motorcycle parking. Ton of coffee and tea shops, so everywhere we got those. But we're enjoying a very peaceful ride on our pedicab.
Yeah.
We're ready to go across the road here. Yeah. Amazing, no one ever hits anybody, but somehow we get through. Dodging everybody. Motorcycle only missing us by about 8 inches. But everybody knows how to do it, so it's not too bad. Coming up, who has selling her vegetables. Got a nice little hat here. Section here.
Oh yeah, here's more like.
Here's the more chaotic. Look at this. Another big intersection coming up. There are no stoplights or stop signs at these intersections. People just somehow try to figure out a way to get through somehow one way or another.
Yeah.
Christmas Eve was spent walking along a lake in central Hanoi. The street was teeming with activity and musicians. It was a very pleasant way to spend our last night in Vietnam.